Yes, my husband is very supportive in his own way. The poor man, brought up as a Punjabi boy, the thought that his wife is out there, talk about sexuality, it just like destroys him. But he has learned to cope with it because I wasn't going to give up. I've been called a corporate call girl. I've lost friends over my work. It happens to everybody. I just want to be unafraid of being in a particular space and being noticed. They're very feminist goddesses, not because they're going out there and saying, down with the men and get rid of them. It's not. They're just above gender. They are self-sufficient. It all comes down to the stories you tell and the stories that you own and the words that you use.
Welcome back to #Preach. In today's episode, I'm in conversation with the beautiful Seema. Seema is of course very well known for her extensive work and study in ancient texts like the Mahabharata, Kamasutra, Bhagavad Gita, Mahavidyas. What I love about Seema the most though is her stellar art of storytelling. How she addresses really complex and often misunderstood and taboo subjects like sexuality, feminism, and weaves it in these amazing stories that make it very relevant, very relatable to our times. In today's episode, I urge Seema to take me on a journey to better understand this confounding interplay and interconnectedness of the feminine and the masculine energy in this capitalist environment and structure that we function in our everyday. And luckily for us, Seema does this in a signature wit, her sassy sense of humor through animated storytelling. Let's go. Thank you, Seema, so much for being here today. I've already chatted you up for what feels like seconds, but it's been hours. So I think before we get into this conversation, if you can just expand a bit on what the feminine energy is and what the masculine energy is.
So I guess we've always been told, at least in our background, coming from India, coming from the stories that we've grown up on, that we contain all the different energies within us, so the masculine as well as the feminine. And scientifically, they say, okay, the brain is divided into two halves. So one side is feminine, the other side is masculine. And this side makes you do this, and this side makes you do that. I think, however, that it's just so interlinked. I think that we have decided to define it and divide it because every single thing that I do with the energy that belongs to me. So I have an instinctive energy. Whatever I do, if I pick up this glass, I will do it in the way that I think is best. And then my societal conditioning comes in and I will then pick it up according to that. Yeah. And I think that when you divide or define masculine and feminine energies, it's societal conditioning.
Absolutely.
And interestingly, I do a lot of talks for Clifford Chance, which is a really well-known law firm. The branch in Poland, and one of the senior partners of there is this lovely lady called Agnieszka. And she said that for the longest time, as we know, women have had to fight for their place in the corporate sector. And she said there were defined rules on dress code, what women were allowed to wear. And she's taken a lot of time and effort to break down those codes.
Yeah, I mean, even now, if I have to do a shoot, which is a girl boss look, I'll still put on like a suit and
a jacket or something.
Things like that, instead of like going to a sari, which for me is more glamorous as the society has told us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this whole sort of, it's just amazing because last year on International Women's Day, I did an online Zoom talk for about 100 of their staff. And so I remember Agnieszka saying to the ladies who were listening in, and a lot of them were very young staff, very keen, where you join the corporate sector and you're determined to make it work because you are going to be that killer person, who like is going to reach the sky. And she said to them, the very first thing that you people need to understand is that we are not men. Stop trying to be a man in your work. You're a woman. You have your strengths. You're able to bring that. There's nothing less about the female strength. Bring your female energy to your work. You can't suddenly negate everything that you are and say, okay, I'm a woman. I've been brought up as a woman. I've learned how to be a woman. Now I'm going to make that into zero. Start from there and try and build up and be like somebody else who I am not because I need to. That's the road to success.
But I feel like there's a gap there, and I find it in me, this lack. A lack of vocabulary or terminology, which is why like I listen to you so keenly, is because I want to find the words to be able to describe myself, because capitalism just as a structure where probably your friend's company exists in, mine exists in, it has a very masculine, um, very obvious attribute to it, which is eat or be eaten. And when you're talking about like opening doors, walking in, and like those footsteps that sound really firm and clean and assertive and aggressive and ruthless, they're all very, very masculine terms. So there is a space where I think maybe such conversations that help us feel like, what do you think feminine attributes at work look and sound like?
So, like I said, it's actually about understanding and just owning the fact that you're a woman. Do you remember that film called Legally Blonde? I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Where she wears pink outfits to be a lawyer, and it's just so not the thing. I think it's literally about owning it. Okay, so when I started doing a lot of the corporate training work in the UK, I would dress up like this. I'd get into a sari, I'd get into my chudiya, I'd have my hair down loose, I'd sashay into offices, they'd look at me and they'd be like, and then it was like, I was told, people aren't going to take you seriously, Seema. You can't show up looking like this. You've got to be in a trouser suit. I very determinedly stuck to this. And I'll tell you where I got the ability to do this. So we have a set of goddesses in our pantheon called the Mahavidyas. I don't know if you've heard of them. The Mahavidyas, which means the goddesses of ultimate knowledge. Right. There are 10 Mahavidyas. They're tantric goddesses. So they're only worshipped with tantric rituals. Right. Now, these goddesses have a dual identity. So Lakshmi, for instance, is also a Mahavidya. Yeah. Kali is the number one Mahavidya. Then you have Tara and so on. And there are 10 of them. Lakshmi is also worshipped as a Hindu goddess, but she's also a Mahavidya, so she's worshipped with tantric rituals. And what's very interesting about the Mahavidyas is that they are not worshipped with any male consort. They're totally independent of their male consorts.
Like how Parvati and Shakti, is Shakti also
Shakti, well, we say that most of these goddesses are actually aspects of Shakti, of Parvati. So that's precisely it. So, they are not joined to any male consort. And if you actually look at them, they're really powerful goddesses. They're very fierce. There's Chinnamasta, for instance. She's the one who's always depicted as where she's chopped her own head off. She's holding the head in her hand. There are 3 streams of blood coming out of her neck, which are feeding 2 other women and herself. So it's very powerful stuff. And what's very interesting is that the philosophy of the Mahavidyas is that they're very feminist goddesses, not because they're going out there and saying, down with the men and get rid of them. It's not. They're just above gender. Right. They are self-sufficient. Beautiful. And I think that's what we have never been taught to be. It's an aspect of our lives that's been consciously removed from us. I was just saying to you before we started chatting that there's that story about the princess and the pea. So the prince who's saying, I want to marry a real princess. And he invites applicants, so women turn up. He puts a little pea on a bed and he puts 9 mattresses on top and he says, sleep on this. And his idea is that he asks them the next morning, did you sleep comfortably? And if they say, yes, I was so comfortable, there were 9 soft mattresses, he's like, they're not real princesses because they did not feel that little pea over there. Yeah. And then finally one girl comes along and she says, oh, that's such a terrible night. Couldn't sleep. It was such a bumpy mattress. Like, that's a real princess. And you realize today, I grew up listening to that story. Think of what it does to your brain. Yeah. I didn't know. I was too young to know just how screwed up that was. Yeah. And I truly believed, I grew up saying, I'm never going to be a princess because I would not have felt that beat. Yeah. And I've said it for years.
I'm not a typical girl.
Yes, and also the fact that I'm just not good enough. I'm clearly not good enough because I have to aspire to be that fragile and that delicate. I finally learned to say, okay, I'm not a princess, I'm a goddess. I have the power to sleep on any number of peas. What the hell?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It takes so much work to get, unlearning. So with my kids, I have one daughter, I have two boys and a girl. And with my daughter, I just made sure that these are not stories that she's brought up on. Obviously, all stories are told to all kids, but you explain to them that, okay, that's a little bit of fun, but it's also a load of shit.
So, what is that one story that you would want to tell your daughter?
I think stories are the most powerful tool of influence. They have immense power. And when you tell a story, when you listen to a story, it kind of creates a roadmap for your mind.
Right.
I find that whenever we tell stories of women, we always tell stories of victimization. Okay? Yeah. We tell stories of hai bechari. We tell stories of, the delicate beauty. She was so beautiful. She needed to be looked after. I like to tell stories of, just the happy stories where women are happy and strong and just going about their normal life.
Yeah.
People will come and say, Acha, so you're saying that if you bring back these stories, suddenly women are going to feel empowered. Yeah. Yes, they are, because those stories act as role models.
Absolutely. And it gives you something to kind of anchor back into,
And to aspire to.
Yeah.
And to know that it's okay.
The flip side, you also hear stories of she was so strong and she just bared it all and she was so tolerant and she was just so...
but not those kind of stories where...
It's extreme.
Yeah, where it's just like... Because those stories are like she was...
Mother India.
Yeah. She was so strong that she basically patiently took whatever was happening to her. No, I'm a warrior. Yeah. I'm sorry. If something goes wrong, you fix it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have the strength to fix it. I can't fix everything. Sometimes you need another couple of women along with me to say, okay, let's make this all right. But it's just that, we have been taught to develop our minds in a particular way. And we've been taught that the male energy is where you need to be if you want to succeed. The female energy is where you need to be if you want to run a home. Yeah. And it's just like, so there's this story from the Skanda Puran, which I particularly like. There was this idea about if a girl did not get married by a certain age, it was toba, it was terrible. And her father, if a girl in his lifetime, if she was to die without belonging to a man, that was a sin on the father.
It still very much is a reality.
I know.
Yeah.
So there's this fabulous story in the Skanda Puran where there is this woman. Her father is the king. She's gone past her marriage date, so she's older. Now, God knows what they meant by older, but 18. Let's say 18, yeah. And the father is like, oh my God, she's not going to get married. And he gets so depressed that he cannot run the kingdom. So this girl says that she's going to now do tapasya. And finally the goddess comes to her and she says, look, I need to get married, not because I want it, but because of my father and his kingdom, because the people of our kingdom are going to suffer. And so the goddess says, okay, fine, I'll make sure you get married. And she says, hold on. I also want to say, I realize I'm supposed to be older than the average age of being marriageable, but that doesn't mean that I'm just going to put up with anybody. So if you're going to find me a husband, he has to be good looking, he has to be successful, he has to be strong, da. And the goddess is like, oh, okay, I've already promised this, I better do the right thing. And I just think that's a story that I think I should have been told when I was a child.
Right.
That
you have agency.
Okay. Yeah, you have agency.
Yeah. Feminine energy is like the moon. It is creative. It is ever changing. Unlike the masculine energy, which is more sun, which is more focused, which is more compartmentalized. And I think the both of them coming together actually creates a balance. But when I'm making my collections, it's the hardest time for me because I'm supposed to be so creative at the same time. It usually is like peak season time, sales time and like events, and you have to show up, and I'm shit scared of social events. I literally shrivel up and die. Okay, so this balancing act actually exhausts you to a point where there is no rasa left in me at the end of it, is what I feel. And rasa, or even the way you explain that Kamadev is usually looked at as a god of desire, and pleasure is always tied very quickly to sexuality and sex and things like that. But there's more to it. And I think that if you can also delve into what are the rasas of life. And when you are being creative, when you have this kind of just an influx of so much sad information all the time coming your way, how do you still feel? And how do you still be compassionate to the outside world and to yourself? Like this balance.
So literally, like, how do we create miracles? Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. That's all, Seema.
That's all. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So have you ever noticed that? So the saying is that men write epics and women will write short stories, because a man has all the time in the world, right? That's his focus. His way of thinking is that, okay, this is what I need to do, and there's somebody else who's going to look after all the emotional side of my life.
Absolutely.
As the woman, you will write your book, you'll read your papers, you'll look after your children. You basically nurture the relationships. There's a lovely story from possibly the Mexican mythology, which says that a woman is created from the skin on the corn that is underneath the foot, because that's the part of you that feels everything. And it really does. Literally. So I think that's actually one of our greatest assets. But clearly, because we've never been taught how to manage it, we don't know how to manage it. And you're absolutely right. As a creative person, I know that when I'm being creative, when I'm writing, I have to open myself up to, basically you have to make the energy go up. When the energy goes up, people think that there's a different energy for this, and that there are no little tubes over there which say, okay, this bit is going over here and it's going to do this, and this bit is going to go over there, and you're going. It's an energy that courses through your body. It makes everything come alive. If you cannot actually manage that energy, it manages you. I think that a lot of very creative people end up in terrible lows or in terrible highs because you're trying to deal with that energy. You need to keep it alive so you can really create well. If you can't keep it alive, you can still create, but it's not as amazing.
Absolutely.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah,
For anybody who's creative, you know that. Now, you run a team that's almost entirely women.
Yeah.
I run a team that's almost entirely women. We have one guy in our team. There's such a huge difference in the way that he deals with things and the way the rest of us do. And I actually find that, when we have an issue, when we have a problem, we've learned how to deal with it because things come up. And I don't know what it is. It's almost intrinsic. It's sort of inside. You're there to sort of lend that little bit of energy to the next person. So I think that basically this idea that when women work together, they have the understanding of how to pool the energy in together. So if one is slightly lower and then the other one is slightly better, there's an EQ in how we run it. I don't think that most guys, I'm not going to say all guys, but I think that the masculine energy doesn't quite run it like that. It is also seen as slightly, what the hell, kya kar rahe ho? And I know that one guy in our team, he kind of he can't understand why the hell we're being so like, oh, like move on, man.
Yeah, like there's a very move on energy. Like you're still here.
You're still here. And sometimes, it's about saying, okay, I need to marinate in this particular emotion.
I love that. That is going to be my word. You really do need to marinate, but people expect you to just come on. Okay, cool. Like, but can you focus on now? Like, can you focus on next?
And like we were saying earlier, and you said that when you're creating, at the same time, you're having to think about sales figures and that event and what am I going to wear for this so that people notice this and who am I going to approach? You've got to do all of that and yet create at the same time. And that's what really sucks it out of you.
Yeah.
And it does. And I think it's because we as women do not give ourselves permission to say, well, all right, these are the 5 things, that's all I'm going to focus on. We don't give ourselves permission to back off because somewhere we've also been taught that there is guilt associated with backing off.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, yeah.
Yeah, and no matter how many times you say it, that, okay, look, don't think about it. The world will look after itself. It'll still run.
Yeah, it automatically opens the doors and the windows and comes in, even if it's not welcome. It's like,
You're still thinking about that. Yeah. And I think that the day that we can understand that, yes, okay, this is my creative time, And it is my right to have this creative time, and it's part of my Shakti, it's part of my pleasure, it's part of the awakening of my senses. I think the day that we accept that, you actually are able to move on.
Yeah. I think the answers are so simplistic that we don't want to actually accept that.
And I also think that, somewhere we come right back to this thing of being as cutthroat. I'm not saying that as women we cannot be cutthroat. Man, we have that ability.
Yeah.
But we've also had to subdue that because society says that that's not how you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So you're literally fighting everything, every bit of natural instinct in you, where you're saying, okay, I need to do this. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get this done.
Yeah.
But oh my God, what will people think? And should I be so hard? You're literally fighting every aspect.
Which is what I want to say. Like, do you think acceptance is way harder for women because we actually want somebody outside of us to accept it first? Like, I'll accept it if first you accept this truth of me, or you tell me that it's okay for you to take, the day off.
We need validation. We need to be told that you need to be seen as something that we have been told that we're not.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. And quite honestly, I think that if I run my team in the way that I think is best, where if one says, you know what, I have to put my dissertation in tomorrow and I really can't focus on this today, I'm like, that's fine. You focus on your dissertation. Ye kaam kal bhi ho jayega.
Yeah.
The world won't come to an end. And I also know that when they have to do a particular thing, it'll get done, or there will be somebody else to step in and we will manage it. But because we've been told that a guy wouldn't do that, he would do this and he'd say, yeah, but, and then we're trying to fit in. So we're just constantly trying to fit into boxes. And I think the day that you realize that actually I am the box. I am the boss because I'm the box.
Have you realized the box?
I've almost realized that I'm the box. Okay, I've reached the age of 60 and realized that I lose it every now and then. And I was saying that the interesting part of my life is that my daughter has suddenly become that energy that moves me forward. And she's the one who actually taught me several things that I should have known. I should have been teaching her, but again, the guilt factor, oh my God, why is she teaching me? Why didn't I know this before? But she has to remind me sometimes of what my ethos is.
Yeah.
Yes, we are in this capitalist world. Yes, we're in it to make the money. I'm not saying we're not. And yes, we're in it to succeed and make a lot of money as well. But also, every now and then, it's okay to sit back and say, you know what, I can do this one for love. It's okay. Or I can do this one because I want to, or I just want to take time out.
Yeah,
I can go out and succeed again tomorrow because just because I step back once, it doesn't mean that ek bus aayegi, wo chali jayegi.
Yeah, that's what I say.
I'll get
like,
on the next
there's
bus.
no such thing as work-life balance.
Yeah.
It is a trade-off. Like you're saying, like today, I'm going to do it for love. And tomorrow, I'm going to do it for probably the money or the business. And, so this brings me to this point of when I write on Instagram or in my interviews, whenever the topic of feminism kind of comes up, or even when you're just, I see you. I feel like, again, as women, we don't have enough tools to continue this, not really a fight, but the movement. I think that the past deserved our anger, 100%. I don't think we would have been here having this conversation if we did not use anger, and we used it really well. And I really owe it to all the generations before me who have done it for me. But now I feel like this is a time for me to be able to tap into more tools to help the movement forward and not polarize the world further. And I wanted to hence ask you, how is it? Is it through a story? How do I take this narrative back? Because I feel like feminism has kind of gone out of my hand and into like all these people are really angry about it.
It's suddenly become a bad word, hasn't it?
It's become a bad word, and for no reason at all.
So it is literally, like you said, it's the stories we put out. I was actually thinking, I was having to write something. And when we talk about the bra burning.
Yeah.
So that wasn't actually, they didn't burn any bras. It was actually called in 1968 in America when they did this. So they were on a protest, and from underneath their t-shirts, the women took off their bras. It was actually called the trash can event. They chucked them into a trash can. it wasn't a burning bra. But, the papers picked that up. They ran with this new narrative. It got labeled. It was taken away.
Yeah.
It lost its
And it became like violent,
Yeah.
it's
and
scary
everything. I mean, the moment you say it's a bra burning, you change the vocabulary, you change the whole thing. Like you said, it becomes violence. And, the women who participated in that were furious because they were like, we were trying to do something. We were just trying to say we're binning our controls, like leave it at that, because we're still, like we said, you're living in society. You want to be able to say something and then say, okay, yeah, I've done what I had to do. I'm walking away. It was taken out of our hands, and it does make you really angry. So, yeah, it's about understanding and repracticing.
Yeah. I heard in one of your podcasts, and you were talking about sex, and you said that if we just alter the terminology, which is how beautifully is the genitalia expressed in the Kama Sutra, with like really beautiful terms, which probably if you say will sound lovelier than if I do. It changes the whole context and your approach to it. It just becomes more loving and more pleasurable. So I think it's similar to what you're trying to say about even feminism and what it actually stands for.
Absolutely. The words you pick. So the words that you use define your actions. And our genitalia is always referred to in terms of abuse. Every single one is an abusive word. And it didn't start off as being abusive, it just turned abusive. The Kama Sutra tends to refer to, they believe in elegance. For them, the whole idea is that lovemaking should be this beautifully refined sort of thing where it's all about pleasure and about heightening your senses. It's so fabulous. It's not like, like get out with it. And what also fascinates me, as you heard probably, the fact that the vagina is being called the Chandan Mahal. And I always say, well, can you imagine that being used as an abusive term? Like, no. It's, it's like, Teri Chandan Mahal. You can't really. The other fascinating thing is the fact that the clitoris is even spoken about because, the clitoris has only come into our lives in the last 100 years or so. It's been pushed under the carpet. And they had a word for it and they understood the nerve endings that went into it. It's called the Madan Chatri, the umbrella of the love god. I mean, how gorgeous is that? And, Naomi Wolf says in her book that imagine a girl growing up listening to her body referred to in terms of such beauty. And the fact that her pleasure is what keeps the universe in balance. How differently she would feel about herself as she grows up.
Beautiful, yeah, very empowering.
It's
completely different.
Yeah, whereas we, like we were saying, you end up kind of being, you're hiding yourself.
Hunched
Yeah. Have you heard of a goddess called Bulam Muki?
I haven't.
Okay. Bulam Muki is the goddess of, a lot of people are very frightened when they hear the name Bulam Muki. People associate her with black magic and so on. I want to start by saying there's no such thing. Okay. But Bulam Muki is the goddess of ultimately intelligent speech. Wow. Okay. They say that she can give you the power of such superior speech that with it you can paralyze your enemies. Okay, so she's the goddess of lawyers and politicians. But basically, people have lost that little bit about that she can give you the power, that you have to learn this ability to speak well. They come straight to, she can give you the power to paralyze people. No, she can't. She gives you the power to paralyze people through your very superior speech. And they call her Brahma Astra Rupini, which is she who is like the Astra, the weapon of Brahma. It all comes down to the stories you tell and the stories that you own and the words that you use. And it is still a fight. It hasn't gone away. And it's going to be a battle for a long, long time. But it's about telling those stories. I think what frustrates me most in my vocabulary when it's taken away from me is that the stories that keep coming back are always the stories of Bechari, usko ye ho gaya, then she fought back. I want to tell stories of how, for a lot of us, we are at this particular point where we're very, very fortunate. We have privilege.
Yeah, we do.
Okay? We've been born into this point where we have the right to be who we are, we have the finances to be who we are, and we have the status to fight back with or to be who we are. We never tell stories of people like us being able to do what we want to do and leaving that as a role model.
Right.
Yeah? Because the moment you sort of say something, then it's like, yeah, well, you come from a point of privilege.
Yeah.
Yes, I know I do. But equally, I'm trying to change the narrative to something else. So everybody always wants to know about the fight that you've gone through. We've all gone through fights.
The victim angle is very important in any story. Like even if
Yeah.
you just boil it down to Instagram, right? Like anything that has a story that says she went from this to this is what is great, but not like as you beautifully said some time ago, that women just doing their normal things, like everyday things, and doing them well.
Absolutely.
You know?
And so I ran a series of workshops a long time ago called the Scar Stories. So basically a story is like this, it's circular. And you can start a story from any point. You can start it from the point of being the victim, where you're telling it like this. You can start it from being the survivor, where you're telling it like this. And you notice, the moment you put your shoulders back and you look up, you're telling it differently. Your voice, your expression, your internal energy is different. And yes, we all have our battles and we've all faced issues, but we're also survivors who now have something to offer. So I want people to know that it's possible to be this. Yeah. Everybody doesn't have to fight about just because my battle hasn't started there and it started here, it doesn't mean it's been less of an effort.
When you did that, I think we were all smiling here. The team was smiling because I was telling them that in therapy, my therapist is always like, sit up.
Sit up. Yeah.
Because somehow in India, she said, she's worked in the US, she's worked in Europe, and she said it's only in India that I see women sit like this. But even amongst us, we're just all hands crossed, like hunching and covering ourselves and talking this way. And it actually literally changes.
It does.
Everything. And I think that is a very Indian thing, and I was very sad to hear that, but I've consciously started observing that in me.
So I remember the very first point where, when I started my work on sexuality, I really didn't think I was being brave, in inverted commas. I really didn't think it was such a big deal. It's just kind of gradually come to me how much harder it is for a lot of people. So like I said, yes, it is privilege. You come from a certain background, you know that you can talk a certain way and you have the ability to do so without being too badly touched. Although I have been. I've been called a corporate call girl. I've lost friends over my work. You get called names. You understand all the things that people expect you to be. And the moment you step out of that expectation and you start to become somebody, or you start to be heard, that becomes a problem. And I think one of the first things that I did, like most young women brought up in India, I have worn nude lipstick forever. About 7 years ago, I switched to red. And it made my mouth visible. And I was so conscious of it because I didn't want to be visible. It's like, oh my God. It is gradually from there. It's like the churiyan. I started off like most people. Already I'd been told, you're getting older. People of your age shouldn't be wearing silver. This is for younger people. I like silver. Okay, so 1 kada, then 2. And over time I realized that this gives me such joy. I mean, the chunkier, the more they are.
Now.
Sort of, yeah. And it's funny because when I lose a bit of weight, I can wear more. So, it's all totally dependent on where I am with my weight. But the more I wear, and the small churis don't give me the same thrill. This actually kind of sends the entire rasa rushing through my body. It actually gets me going. The next thing was the white bindi. I suddenly discovered one day that it lights up my face because, my coloring is such that the white really pops. And again, I've come in for criticism. Why are you wearing that? The usual stuff. But I've realized that suddenly, as I gather more confidence, as I gain confidence in me just being me, I have allowed myself to become visible. So I will walk into places where everybody might be in a pair of jeans. I'll be in my sari, my bindi, and all my churiyan, just because, you know what, this morning I woke up and that's what I wanted to do. It's not easy even for me. And I want people to know this, that it's not that, yeah, I can just do it. It takes effort. It takes my energy as well, because I know that people are going to be staring, and it's not always nice stares. And that's not what you necessarily want, is people staring. I just want to be unafraid of being in a particular space and being noticed. There's a difference.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, look at me. I just want to be unafraid if somebody does look at me.
Yeah, I think one of the words that I'm really obsessing with, I feel like it's my personal purpose, is how to be more courageous. I feel like I lack courage. Like in my workspace, I have it. But in my personal space, in my emotional space, and over the past 2 years, I found myself leaning on a lot of women. And I turned 30, and that's when this kind of started, I was faced with this, and I leaned on a lot of women. And the difference that has made. Did you find yourself leaning on women to get here, or it was just a lot of study, self-study, therapy? What did you do to arrive at this? I know you spoke of your daughter.
It's my tribe of women. There is no other word for it. No matter how much study, no matter how much self-development you do, it's your tribe of women. For a long time, I had the wrong tribe of women. They were putting me down. They were telling me, if we'd go out to a party, let's say, and some guy hit on you, and I'd be like, oh my God, this guy's such a bastard, he hit on me. And I'd be like, tune kuch kiya hoga. Tune kya kiya? What did you do to encourage him? Wow. It was so typical. It was just so automatic. I've had people lose it with me because it's like, well, why didn't you do it? It's like, I'm sorry, but this is not really me. That's the wrong person over here.
It's not a me problem.
I now have, over time, you learn which people to shed and which people to keep. I now have a group of amazing women. And yes, my husband is very supportive in his own way. The poor man, he's Punjabi. He's brought up as a Punjabi boy. The thought that his wife is out there, talk about sexuality, it just like destroys him. The poor chap.
Understand, yeah.
But he has learned to cope with it because I wasn't going to give up. And I have 2 wonderful sons who absolutely adore me. And they'll take a certain amount of, okay, mom, like that kind of thing. But it's the women I go to, my daughter-in-law, my daughter, my friends. And it's the right women, the ones who are there supporting me no matter what. I just need somebody to be there to hug you, to say, yeah, you have my energy. Come on, I'm sharing mine with you today. Yeah. It just makes all the difference.
Yeah, how you spoke about the difference between men at work and women at work. I remember collection time, I kind of had a breakdown. So I'm sitting in the middle of my workshop and there are embroidery carts all around me. So I can't really run anywhere because I'm stationed in the middle. And I had a breakdown and I started crying. And I was just so frustrated. I didn't want to cover it up, but I was trying my best. And then I suddenly see one girl coming up and saying, Shubhika, you want water? And another one saying, like, do you have a migraine? And they didn't need to do that. They didn't need to be so tuned into me because they were doing their own thing. It was a stressful time. But I've noticed that. And I think which is why in my relationships with men, I have found such a lack of empathy, not because they're not trying, but instinctively, women are just so much more tuned to what's happening around to a much larger group than just themselves, which also hurts us. But probably I feel like belonging to such a group of women is just so nourishing,
Yeah, it's your tribe.
Yeah.
It literally is. And I don't know how to even explain it, how that energy develops and what it does for you. All I can say is that you're really lucky if you have it.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yeah, it took me some time, but it takes time to find your tribe.
It does.
Even with women, yeah.
Absolutely, particularly with women, because it's a longer lasting relationship. So it does take longer to find the right tribe. And Yeah, and you're right. It's not that the guys are not trying. Like I said, my poor husband, I do feel sorry for him when I think about it. Now that I've kind of crossed a couple of barriers, because at one point that was another argument constantly. I do feel sorry for him because he just can't get why some things are just not okay, or like he needs to be emotionally available a little bit
Yeah.
more. I mean, we had one of our biggest fights over this point where I said, "You are emotionally unavailable." And he still reminds me, "Oh, you said that to me." He is. I mean, it's not because he doesn't want to be, he just doesn't know how to be.
Yeah.
It's just how, and the same stories that are told to us, they're also told to the guys.
Yeah.
They're brought up to be the way they are because that's how they have been brought up. It's not really their fault. It's up to us now to change the next generation.
Yeah, I was reading Bell Hooks, all about love, and she says that when men write love stories, they write from a point of receiving. I have received great love. And when women write, and there are very few women writers who've written about love, and each time they write from a space of yearning, of a love that they haven't yet received. So I think that difference also is because of society, right? I don't think that any child is born just, with one person, with one kind of a child knowing how to just give and the other child knowing how to just receive. So
there's certain basic DNA difference.
Yeah.
I think it's stories from centuries of DNA. I think stories also have their DNA, and I think that we're born with certain stories. So my husband's biggest complaint is that I have ruined our daughter by teaching her feminism. Okay, so he's very distraught. So, it's all because of you. Now look the way that she reacts. It's not even anything. And just trying to explain to him that actually there was something and it is worthy of reaction. So it is kind of like it's a constant battle. And I realized my husband is now 71. I don't think I can change him, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But I have hope for my sons. And so, yeah, I do think that being aware that something is just not okay, even if it's tiny, is really important. The second thing is breaking the habit of a lifetime, which is that when you find something that's been said to you, we either kind of do bur 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 bur, or you don't say anything and you go and keep that resentment.
Build up,
Yeah. So it becomes a build up. The ability to say it at that point and then move on. Because the other thing I realized is that the moment you actually call someone out and you say, "I didn't like that," then the woman in you kind of starts trying to make excuses for it.
Yeah.
It's okay. I understand why you said it.
Yeah.
I get it. It's, that's the ultimate thing, to say it and then say,
Yes.
put a smile back on your face and move away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important. It's not going to come easily.
Yeah. How to have conflict, like how to fight without actually fighting, is a skill. And I think, it's a hard one to actually, but fighting is important, but how to fight without it seeming like it's you versus me. So I think what I'm getting from you is feminism. It is a fight.
Word.
It is a fight. It is one that we need to fight.
Yeah.
And we need to fight it in a way where it is not you versus me or like men versus women, but it is the issue. And each time you're faced with something or you know that something is wrong, what's being said, what's being done, you need to call it out. At the same time, after you call that out, you don't really go into like a fight or a flight mode.
You know how we say, choose your battles?
Yeah.
It's that.
Thank you so much, Seema, for this conversation. I'm taking away so much from this personally, and I think the best conversations are one that actually move you personally, and this one I always knew would. So thank you for your time, and I hope that we can take away the little bit of storytelling that you bring to the table so beautifully by saying that stories are what allow you to take your narrative back, because stories allow for the listener to not feel like they're being judged or being preached to. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for that tool.
Not at all. You're very welcome. It's an absolute pleasure. Always remember, you don't ever look at life as one big whole, because that's like really overwhelming. Always look at your life as a series of tiny, tiny little stories. Change one ending at a time. So much easier to deal with.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you so much.